There is a mental state your brain desperately needs to function. It was so common for 300,000 years of human history that no one even had a word for it. And in the last 15 years, we have almost completely eliminated it. The result, according to neuroscientists, psychologists, and cognitive researchers, is a quiet catastrophe, one that is reshaping human creativity, emotional resilience, and the ability to think original thoughts. The state is boredom, and what I'm about to tell you will make you look at your phone very differently. We have been taught to treat boredom as a malfunction, something to be fixed, escaped, medicated with content. There is an entire economy worth over $4 trillion built specifically around the single goal of making sure you never experience it. Every app, every algorithm, every autoplay feature exists for one purpose: to ensure that the moment boredom begins to form in your mind, it is immediately killed. But here is what that economy does not want you to know. Boredom is not a bug in human cognition. It is one of the most sophisticated features the brain ever evolved, and we are the first generation in human history that has chosen to turn it off completely. For virtually all of human history, boredom was not optional, it was structural. Hunter-gatherer tribes, the template for the human brain you are currently using, worked an average of 3 to 4 hours per day acquiring food. The anthropologist Marshall Sahlins documented this in 1972, calling them the original affluent society, not because they had more things, but because they had more time. The remaining hours were not filled. They sat, they stared into fire, they watched clouds, they wandered without a destination. Modern researchers studying the few remaining hunter-gatherer populations on Earth, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of the Kalahari, consistently report the same observation. These communities spend enormous amounts of time doing what researchers initially classified as nothing. It took neuroscience decades to understand what that nothing actually was. In 2001, neurologist Marcus Reichel at Washington University made a discovery that quietly rewrote our understanding of the brain. He noticed that when subjects were given no task to perform, when they were told to simply rest and let their minds wander, a specific network of brain regions lit up with intense, coordinated activity. He called it the default mode network. The name makes it sound passive. It is the opposite. The default mode network is where the brain does its most complex work. It is responsible for autobiographical memory, your sense of who you are across time. It processes unresolved emotional experiences. It simulates future scenarios and runs through possible versions of events that haven't happened yet. It is the seat of empathy, the generator of creative insight, and the system that constructs your sense of self. It only activates fully when you are doing nothing. Boredom, it turns out, is not the absence of thought. It is the condition under which the brain thinks most deeply. This finding has since been replicated across dozens of studies. A 2014 study published in the journal Psychological Science found that people who performed a boring task before a creative challenge significantly outperformed those who went straight to the challenge. The bored brain was not sluggish, it was primed. A 2019 study from the University of Bath found that boredom increased what researchers called approach motivation, a drive toward goal-seeking behavior and problem-solving. Boredom, the researchers concluded, is not an enemy of productivity. It is one of its primary engines. Your brain, when given nothing, does not shut down. It goes looking. For most of human history, the brain got this time automatically. Long walks with no destination, waiting for rain, the hours between sunset and sleep, repetitive manual labor that occupied the hands but freed the mind. These were not inconveniences of pre-modern life. They were, neurologically speaking, maintenance cycles. The brain was being cleaned, sorted, and reset on a daily basis without anyone understanding that was what was happening. Then came the 20th century, and with it, one invention after another specifically designed to fill silence. Radio, television, portable music, the internet. the smartphone. Each one arrived and reduced the available space for the default mode network to operate. But the smartphone was different in kind, not just degree. Every previous technology required you to be somewhere, to sit by the radio, to be in front of the television. The smartphone came with you, into the elevator, into the bathroom, into the 30-second gap between one task and the next. It eliminated the last remaining pockets of unstructured time in modern life. The neuroscientist Daniel Levitin, in his research on cognitive load, identified what he calls the 4-second rule. When the human brain detects a gap in stimulation, even a gap as short as 4 seconds, it reflexively seeks input. Before 2007, that reflex had nowhere to go in public. You waited. The reflex passed. The default mode network engaged. After 2007, that reflex had an answer in your pocket, available in under 2 seconds at all times. The brain stopped waiting, and it never learned to start again. The numbers that followed were not subtle. Between 2011 and 2019, the first decade of mass smartphone adoption, reported rates of anxiety among American adolescents rose by 134%. Depression rose by 106%. The psychologist Jean Twenge, who has tracked generational mental health data for over 20 years, identified the inflection point with precision. It was 2012, the year's smartphone ownership crossed 50% penetration in the United States. This is not a coincidence researchers are still debating. The debate is over the mechanism, and the default mode network is at the center of it.
Here is what happens to a brain that never gets bored. The default mode network does not go dormant. It cannot. It is too fundamental to shut down completely. But it becomes fragmented, interrupted, unable to complete the long, slow cycles of processing it was designed to run. What researchers observe in chronically underbored brains is a consistent cluster of effects. Reduced capacity for creative insight, the kind that arrives suddenly, from nowhere, while you're in the shower or staring out a window. That insight is not random. It is the product of the default mode network completing a processing loop that was started days earlier. When those loops are constantly interrupted, the insight never arrives. Impaired emotional processing. The brain uses idle time to consolidate emotional experience, to file difficult events, reduce their charge, and integrate them into autobiographical memory. Without that time, difficult experiences remain raw, unprocessed, closer to the surface. A weakening of the sense of self. This sounds abstract until you feel it. Researchers describe it as a diffuse inability to answer the question, what do I actually want? Chronic stimulation keeps you reacting. Boredom is when the brain asks the longer question. There's a particular detail from the research that stays with me. In a 2014 study published in Science, participants were placed alone in a room for 15 minutes with no phone, no book, and nothing to do, or given the option to administer mild electric shocks to themselves. 67% of men chose the electric shocks. 25% of women did the same. They preferred physical pain to unstructured silence. These were not people in crisis. These were ordinary university students. Sitting alone with their own minds had become, in the space of one generation, genuinely intolerable. John Eastwood, a psychologist at York University who has spent 15 years studying boredom, describes the modern condition this way. We have confused the ability to be stimulated with the ability to think. They are not the same thing. In fact, they may be opposites. The cultures that understood this best did not call it boredom. The Japanese have a practice called ma, the deliberate cultivation of empty space, in architecture, in music, in conversation. The pause is not the absence of meaning. The pause is where meaning lives. The ancient Greeks built rest into the structure of civilization. Skoli, the root of our word school, did not originally mean study. It meant leisure, unstructured time. They considered it the foundation of wisdom, not the enemy of productivity. Medieval monastic traditions across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East all incorporated mandatory periods of silent, unstructured contemplation, not as spiritual luxury, as neurological necessity. Every sophisticated civilization across every era of human history independently arrived at the same conclusion. The mind needs to be left alone, regularly, deliberately, without agenda. We are the first civilization in human history to disagree, and we are running the experiment on ourselves in real time. The results are not encouraging. The next time you reach for your phone in an elevator, and you will, the reflex is almost mechanical now, pause for 1 second before you unlock it. Notice what was there in that gap. Not emptiness, something stirring, something your brain was about to do before you stopped it. That something has a name. Neuroscientists call it the default mode network. Your ancestors called it an afternoon. The ancient Greeks called it the foundation of wisdom. And your brain has been trying to get back to it every single day, in every gap between notifications, every moment before the next video loads, every silence you have not yet filled. The question is not whether you can afford to be bored. The question is whether you can afford not to be. Drop one thought in the comments. When was the last time you sat with nothing, no phone, no music, no podcast, for more than 10 minutes? And what happened?